They'd received the call from the landlord in the dead of night. He was screaming and incoherent, telling them that he'd found a dead body in one of his apartments. He seemed racked with mortal terror and could barely string a sentence together.
The body, he's... Oh God, I don't know how long he's been dead. Something's wrong with it. Something weird. Oh God.
An interview with the landlord hours later would reveal what exactly had happened. One of his tenants, a man named Clarence Narcissus, was a month behind on rent. He wouldn't respond to emails, calls, anything. The landlord expected he'd already taken off, so he decided to drive down and investigate. He'd banged on the door and announced his presence, but there was no response. He used his spare keys to get in, and that's where he discovered what had once been Clarence Narcissus, sitting on the armchair in his living room, deader than dead. The police had to expend considerable forces to cordon off the area. One of the officers on the scene was Nancy Detweiler, a 3-year veteran of the force who'd seen some pretty grisly crime scenes. She'd even seen the remains left by the serial killer that authorities had nicknamed Fernand the Cannibal, but that was still nothing compared to this. She stood next to the lead detective on the case as he stared down at the body, a look of puzzlement furrowing his brow. It was distressing to see that he was clearly just as stumped as she was with this one.
What do you think we're looking at here, sir?
She said. The detective took a thoughtful pause.
If I hadn't seen the before picture, I'd have said severe birth defects.
Officer Nancy cocked her head, trying to get a better look at the freak of nature curled up in that chair like a dead spider. She didn't know what possessed her to say this, but before she could even stop herself, she commented,
How do we know we're not looking at a birth here, sir?
The detective looked at her like she just soiled herself in front of him.
Back to work, Nancy,
he said with distaste.
You've got a perimeter to secure.
She nodded and suppressed the urge to cringe at herself.
What a weird, stupid thing to say.
Her fellow officers were pottering around the apartment's various rooms, tagging and bagging anything that might be useful. She hoped to make detective one day, and making her superiors think she was some kind of spacey freak probably wouldn't fast-track her. Officer Nancy joined her colleagues in the bedroom, where they were attempting to divide evidence from the refuse of a life gone out of control. The place was a sty, that much was undeniable, and not the chaos of a smash-and-grab looting committed in the course of murder. No, everything about Clarence's apartment betrayed a man who had just given up months before he actually died and became, well, whatever he was now. Trash was piled haphazardly. Every surface bore an inch-thick layer of dust or grime. And just from looking at all this video footage, well, you can probably imagine the smell. But Nancy's eyes were drawn to something else in all this, something that, somehow, nobody else seemed to have noticed. An ornate, silver-backed hand mirror on Narcissus's bedside table, like the kind you'd imagine royalty holding. Something about it immediately charmed Officer Nancy. Perhaps it reminded her of who she'd been as a young girl, harboring unrealistic dreams of someday growing up and marrying into royalty, becoming a princess and then a queen and never having to worry about anything. Just wearing beautiful dresses, being waited on by servants, and getting to gaze upon her own beautiful reflection in a mirror just like that. A much more dignified life than being an inner-city beat cop, treated like dirt by all the detectives and the sergeant in her precinct. She was careful about it, of course. She waited until all the other beat cops had left the room in preparation for the CSI techs in their white jumpsuits to climb in and dust everything down. In that brief period of alone time, she grabbed the mirror and stuffed it into her bag. It was such a tiny detail, really. Could you even really consider the bedroom part of the crime scene when the body was found in the living room? And besides, it's not like it was even relevant to the case at hand. The mirror couldn't have been what killed him. Could it? For reasons beyond her, it seemed more important than anything, somehow more than worth the risk of losing her job for tampering at a crime scene. She'd never done anything like that before, and in her defense, she wouldn't ever do anything like that again, either. Whenever she worked late shifts, she called her friend Addison on the way home. She always got the graveyard shift too, out at some research position in the desert, NDA'd out the wazoo, of course, so it's not like she could ever share all the details. "How's your night going?" Nancy asked, the beautiful mirror in her bag still glowing like a waypoint at the front of her mind. "Excellent, thanks," Addison said over the phone.
I got a raise recently, and with the extra money, I signed up to the DrBob Patreon.
Oh, that sounds awesome. I've heard such good things about it. What kind of benefits does he offer to patrons?
More than you'd believe, Addison said. Not only can you get access to behind-the-scenes material and uncensored videos from his main channel, you also get the power to vote on future videos. Talk about bang for your buck. How about you, Nancy?
She smiled to herself. I picked up something fun today at work, too. Can't wait to get a better look at it. And as soon as she was home, that was, naturally, exactly what she did. She poured herself a glass of wine, lit a few scented candles for extra classy vibes, and sat across her sofa in her comfortable civilian clothes. She stared into her hand mirror, feeling just like one of the royals she so wanted to emulate growing up. Sure, the mirror wasn't exactly perfect. There was a tiny crack in the top left corner, but considering she got it for free, and the beautiful roses and vines patterns on the back were so intricate, she felt no drive to complain. Besides, it's not like she could really pay attention to anything but her own reflection in that beautiful hand mirror. It was hard to tear her eyes away. The reflection seemed so crisp, so pure, like it was the first time she'd ever really seen herself. But she wasn't exactly sure she liked what she was seeing here either. Did she really look that old? She was only in her 30s, but the bags under her eyes made her look haggard and exhausted. God, and her pores. Was this what everyone else had been seeing every time they looked at her? She looked sloppy. Her skin had a greasy sheen to it, and most of all, she just couldn't get over how tired she looked. Was this what all those years of working the beat had done to her? Worn her soul down to the nub and made her look all used up and gray? The thought upset her, and yet, she just couldn't stop staring. In the days and then weeks that followed, this became a tradition. Staring into the mirror in the morning and then at night, it reminded her to put more care into her skincare routine, for all the good that seemed to do. At a point, it seemed almost like whenever she wasn't looking into the mirror, picking apart her own appearance, she was thinking about doing it. It became such a fixation for her that she decided to keep the mirror in her patrol car during work hours, just so she could come back and steal a glance whenever she felt the fixation start to take hold. She felt like a junkie, getting cold, clammy, and anxious when she was away from it for too long. She realized at a point that the stress must have been taking its toll on her health. She was starting to get these nasty, itchy facial rashes with increasing frequency. When she looked close enough, it seemed like her skin would be discolored sometimes. It made her feel like the human equivalent of a moldy piece of bread. But that didn't discourage her from looking. She only wanted to look more. Meanwhile, Officer Nancy's friend Addison was hearing less and less of her and starting to get concerned as the weeks continued their terrible march. If you hadn't already put this together, Addison was actually one of my colleagues here at the SCP Foundation, and thus was doing me a solid by promoting my Patreon earlier. You would think that having a position here would make your mind more finely attuned to the anomalous, but as in all cases, it can sometimes be hardest to recognize the horrors festering in your most direct proximity. After a few weeks of sparse contact, Addison decided it would be best to visit Nancy, just to check in on her. What she found did nothing short of fill her with worry. Her friend, hunched over and sick, staring into the unforgiving reflective glass of the mirror. She looked like she hadn't showered or even slept in days. It seemed like some kind of severe emotional breakdown precipitated by extreme workplace stress. That was a feeling that Addison herself was sadly extremely familiar with by now. Since Addison had a medical background before being recruited by the SCP Foundation, she decided to give her friend a quick checkup, just to be safe. She had severely swollen lymph nodes in a manner that suggested a severe autoimmune disease. The rashes and skin discoloration had also spread out over more and more of her body.
Nancy, why didn't you call?
Addison said in dismay.
Need to get ready, she said. Need to get ready. Ready for what, Nancy? For the other.
That was what made Addison realize something terrible was going on here. It would be easy enough for a layperson to interpret all of this as an unfortunate collision of physical and mental symptoms, but Foundation researchers are trained to read between the lines and expect the unexpected. After all, it's always better safe than sorry. A team arrived to pick up Officer Nancy. She didn't even resist, as long as she was allowed to bring the mirror with her. She kept looking at it in the back of the van, and even when she was carried out and taken to a preliminary testing chamber, Addison's superiors said that they'd keep her there for observation, with the hope that her condition would improve over time. Of course, they had no idea just how wrong they were at the time. Just as expected, she continued to be obsessed with the mirror in the coming weeks. She only slept when she literally collapsed as a result of exhaustion, and that was the best time to observe her. Nancy's body was undergoing more radical and disturbing changes. Her jaw was constantly gaping because large cysts were growing in the back of her mouth, wrenching her jaw forever open in what looked like an idiotic gawp. Her ribcage was somehow extending downwards, increasing the length of the trunk of her body. The organs regulating her immune and reproductive systems atrophied and calcified, causing her body to become vulnerable to a bevy of other diseases. When she was still talking, she kept muttering the same nonsense that had driven Addison to commit her in the first place, making herself ready for the other. As part of the battery of tests that the Foundation conducted on her, they also scanned her brain activity. This caused some stress at one point, as the metal components of the mirror made it unsafe for it to accompany her into the MRI machine. She had to be sedated to avoid her getting violent with the staff during the scan. Still, the test was at least productive. There was a marked decrease in activity in both Nancy's amygdalae and her parietal lobes. Her active thought processes were shuttering themselves, a mind slowly shutting itself down by degrees. Nancy was no longer something else, a concession seemingly demanded by the other that she was preparing herself for. The whole process was rather devastating for Addison, who was long past the point of realizing that she wouldn't be getting her friend back. Nancy retreated to the corner of her cell with the mirror one day and just sat there, completely motionless, not sleeping, not eating. Then she began to violently shake and convulse, as though in the throes of a seizure. Researchers immediately had her taken to the medical wing, but it was already too late. Nancy gave one more violent thrash and died right there on the table, with a wet, rattling exhale. Perhaps it was against regulations, but when Addison requested to be the one to perform an autopsy on her deceased friend, I didn't have the heart to deny her request. It would help give her closure. Given that researcher Addison is still taking time off for psychological recovery after performing the autopsy, well, I can't yet say whether she thinks she made the right choice. Upon opening Nancy's chest cavity, she couldn't help but gasp in genuine shock. All of her friend's organs had rearranged themselves, seemingly towards the end of creating a hollow, square-shaped cavity in the middle of her chest where, well, let's just say the other was waiting. It was a tiny, vaguely humanoid creature, like old medieval depictions of the mandrake plant, connected to the rest of Nancy's major organ systems by a series of thread-like veins and neurons. Tendrils from the creature had even begun extending upwards, connecting to Nancy's trachea. We don't know what caused the other to die, given its own physiology is so alien that it's almost impossible to know anything about it at this stage. But it does feel safe to assume that if things had progressed how the other had intended, it would have been able to manipulate Nancy's nervous system, moving her like a marionette puppet, even operating her vocal cords to speak through her mouth. All thanks to SCP-412, the Mutagenic Mirror. The sad case of Officer Nancy Detweiler illustrates almost everything you need to know about the anomalous effects of this seemingly incredibly malicious device. The initial onset of ever-deepening obsession, the slow mutation of the body, a kind of terraforming, and if the subject survives long enough, the intrusion of some kind of parasitic alien being that makes your body its home. A fate worse than death by almost anyone's definition. Truthfully, I don't consider the mirror itself to be the anomaly here, but the still largely unknown force that is using these mirrors as a kind of conduit. Still, the object itself is considered Safe Class by the SCP Foundation and is kept in Storage Unit 11 at Site 19. Anyone handling the mirror must do so with gloves, because study with D-Class personnel has found that both staring at one's reflection and touching the mirror physically are both necessary in order for the anomalous effect to kick in. Of course, given the psychic pull that SCP-412 has over its victims, resisting the urge to look and touch is easier said than done. While the Foundation has some of these mirrors in containment, we have no idea how many more of them are out there, so if you ever happen to see a silver-backed hand mirror that feels strangely alluring, turn 180 degrees and run as fast as you can. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, they say, and you really don't want the other beholding you. Now check out These Predatory SCPs Will Change Your Body Forever, or watch this instead.